Good evening and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting for Monday, March the 2nd at 7 p.m. A little past 7, actually. I would first await a motion to leave the non-public meeting and to seal the minutes of the non-public session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? June, will you please take the roll?
Yes, Mayor. Mayor McCachran.
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Here.
Councilor Cook.
Here.
Councilor Tabor.
Here.
Councilor Blaylock.
Present.
Councilor Bagley.
Here.
Councilor Moreau.
Here.
Councilor Flynn.
Here.
Councilor Hopkins is
Here.
on Zoom.
Oh, there she is.
Are all present, Your Honor?
Thank you, June. As we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, I just would like us to hold in our hearts those service members that died serving their country and to pray for the safe return of all troops. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have the acceptance of minutes for February 17th.
Your Honor, I move to accept and approve the minutes for the February 17th, 2026 City Council meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Oh, we're going to need a roll call vote on this.
That is right. Okay. Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Yes?
Councilor Cook.
Yes.
Councilor Tabor.
Yes.
Councilor Blaylock.
Yes.
Councilor Bagley.
Yes.
Councilor Moreau.
Yes.
Councilor Flynn.
Yes.
Councilor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor McCachran.
Yes. All right, and now we have a wait a motion. Councilor Cook.
Your Honor, I move to suspend the rules and bring up item 19A under the city manager's reports.
Second.
Another roll call vote.
Oh, it's going to be one of those nights. Okay. Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Yes.
Councilor Cook.
Yes.
Councilor Tabor.
Yes.
Councilor Blaylock.
Yes.
Councilor Bagley.
Yes.
Councilor Moreau.
Yes.
Councilor Flynn.
Yes.
Councilor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor McCachran.
Yes.
Unanimous.
City manager.
Apologies. Speaking to the school care item on behalf of the city team that's been working on this matter is Deputy City Attorney Trevor McCourt. Welcome, Trevor.
Thank you, City Manager, Mayor, members of the City Council. Again, Trevor McCourt, Deputy City Attorney. And thank you for pulling this item out of order here tonight so that I can provide this presentation with the benefit of the members of the school board who are here in the audience. I bring this matter to your attention in public, although we have had several conversations about it so far, to discuss with you those items which are within the public knowledge and to prepare the City Council and the school board for decisions which will come from the school care assessment, which the city was notified of at the end of last September of 2025. When I say a school care assessment, at the end of September of last year, school care, which is the risk pool, which provides health insurance to school employees, notified the city of Portsmouth that they were imposing an assessment in the amount of $30 million across all members of the pool. School care allocated an assessment on the city in the amount of $1.57 million. That was the city's pro rata share of this assessment. Over the ensuing months, I, in association with the other members of the legal team and the city manager's office, have been conducting due diligence on the assessment and the current posture of school care in order to bring this to the City Council and the school board's attention, along with the attention of the various unions impacted by this assessment. Of course, if the city were to pay an assessment of $1.57 million, there would have to be a public process and a public vote around payment of that amount of money. But before I get too far into the weeds there, I did want to just first discuss publicly what a risk pool is, what school care is, just to set the table for this discussion. A risk pool is an entity that is a creature of statute, much like the city, but risk pools are created by RSA 5B. That's the limited universe in which risk pools live, and the kind of concept of it is less of an insurance company and more of a cooperative, where various authorized entities, such as municipalities, school districts, and similar type entities, can come together and work together to basically, in a cooperative sense, self-insure, where they will use one of the larger insurance companies like Cigna or the like, or Anthem, to process claims, but then claims are paid out of this pool. The pool collects from each of its members monthly premiums, which it pools all together, and then from those monthly premiums, they then pay out based on claims of members. And according to RSA 5B, those premiums are the only specifically defined fundraising mechanism available to risk pools. And the city has been, both on the municipal side and on the school side, has been a member of one risk pool or another for decades. The school side employees have been members of school care since about 2012. The city is a member of Primex, which is another kind of risk pool, not for health insurance, but for property and liability. This is a common tool used throughout the state. Now, to bring you back to this assessment, this $30 million assessment from school care. Like I said, in September of 2025, school care made the decision to impose a $30 million assessment on all of its members that was divided up on a pro rata share based upon size of each pool member. And again, the city's portion was $1.57 million. The rationale for this assessment is that the stated rationale is that school care had, because of extraordinarily high claims and because of their rate setting pattern over a period of years, they had exhausted all of their reserves and were at a deficit as of July 1st of 2025, and we're projected to be at an even deeper deficit by the end of this current fiscal year that we're in now. And school care runs on the same fiscal year as the city, from July 1 to June 30th. And they school care proposed to use this assessment to balance their books, to bring them back out of the negative, to fulfill their deficit, and to build back a reserve, a part of a reserve, but which would still be less than what was recommended by their actuarials. Now, this assessment is not authorized by the membership agreement between the city and school care. Likewise, it is not authorized by RSA 5B. Now, again, I will bring you back to what is the nature of a risk pool. What a risk pool is a lot of communities coming together, a lot of different entities coming together to basically self-insure on a cooperative basis. And so the reason why the reserves had been extinguished and why it was at a negative, their funding was at a negative, an operational deficit, was because of those really high claims. Now, based upon a series of public records requests, right to know law requests, and other document requests, where documents were provided to the city on a confidential basis as a member, more information has become clear about school care and why they were at a deficit. It is also, school care has indicated to us that they had an actuarial for a period of time coming out of COVID up until the end of this last fiscal year, an actuarial who was setting rates at an extraordinarily, or who was setting rates at a level that they weren't used to, less conservatively than they used to, and they were refilling their reserves on a slower basis than they had in years past. I have also found that As of June 30th of 2023, school care had a reserve in the amount of $29.5 million, which was then paid down and extinguished, exhausted over a period of 3 years. And this assessment, again, is designed to refill a portion of that reserve with the remainder apparently to be recovered through rate setting, through the ordinary course. Now, school care have issued this assessment to the city. Again, back at the end of September, they provided a deadline that they created of December 31st of last year for all members to make this payment. School care stated to all members that if any member failed to pay the assessment, then school care may stop paying claims on insured members. Now, first, the city has continued to make its premium payments since that time. It continues up until this day and has signed up with school care to provide insurance for school-side employees in the next fiscal year. The city has done that first and foremost because it is our contractual obligation under our collective bargaining agreements with those units to provide a school care plan, and that is our obligation. Second, it is the city's position that the city has not breached its contract. The city continues to fulfill its side of its contractual agreement with school care by paying the rates that it agreed to in the last fiscal year for this current fiscal year, and has agreed now to pay the rates in next fiscal year that are set by school care. School care sets each of these rates on an annual basis. This is in spite of the fact that school care's rates are projected to increase by 26% between this fiscal year and next fiscal year. And the city is in ongoing negotiations with school care to process the assessment and find a way that the city and school care can continue to remain in a contractual relationship if at all possible. Now, I have to make it clear that the city is only authorized to spend taxpayer monies if authorized by statute or by contract. And as of right now, there is no contract that has been entered into between the city and school care for payment of that assessment of the $1.57 million. Part of the ongoing negotiation between school care and the city is to try to find a way where school care can remain a going concern with the city as a member, with the payment of whether it's an assessment or some lower amount or some other arrangement, and whether we can all do that by contractual agreement. Now, in one of the things that I have been requesting and senior leadership at the city has been requesting of school care is implementation of board policies which would better protect members and better protect insured, better protect all those employees who are covered by school care insurance. Those policies would include policies around net reserves, how much reserves are maintained on an annual basis, how frequently are those reserves refilled, how frequently should school care communicate with its membership when it appears that reserves are falling, to try again to head this off. I mean, this presents a very difficult situation for municipalities and other government entities in order to have to raise and pay the amount of money that we're talking about here off budget cycle kind of in the middle of the year. Recall that this assessment came out in September with a deadline of December, which is off of any municipal budgeting timeline. To that end, the city is prepared to attend and speak at a meeting of the school care board this Wednesday, where counsel for school care has indicated to me that certain board policies will be presented to the board for their consideration. I have not been provided with any of these board policies. I don't know what they will say, but it is my hope that those board policies will implement and be along the lines of the kinds of things that I'm talking about here tonight, and hopefully go even farther to secure a stable working relationship between school care and its members. At that meeting, I will also propose a counterproposal to school care. Before I go to that, though, I will say that Concord and Londonderry, both members of school care, had negotiated alternative payment plans other than payment of the entire assessment all at once. Their payment plans were around making some payment before the end of last calendar year, before the end of December of last year, and paying the rest of the assessment between July 1st and July 15th of this year. And the counterproposal that we are seeking input on from school care, which would certainly be contingent upon an agreement by this body, by the city council, in collaboration with the school board, would be to, and this is a proposal, this is something that you would all have to consider. This is not etched in stone, but it's something that seemed fair, would be for the city to pay its pro rata share of the operational deficit for this year, recognizing that we are paying for claims in fact incurred by our insured. And then in order to rebuild the reserves, to rebuild those through rate setting over a period of 2 years. The remainder of that assessment will be then incorporated into rates over a 2-year period. Now this should also be put in the context of pending legislation. Immediately prior to the implementation of, or a few months prior to the implementation of an assessment by school care, there was a Senate bill that was pending before the New Hampshire legislature, which would have authorized assessments by risk pools, and that legislation failed. It did not pass. Currently, in this current legislative session, there are numerous bills which seek to address this question of assessments and reserves and how reserves are built and to what level. Some of those bills, such as Senate Bill 616, I believe.
661.
661, excuse me, thank you. 661 sets these kinds of safeguards that we're talking about for assessments. It provides different drawdown thresholds on it sets what the reserve should be and sets drawdown thresholds by which once your reserve reaches a certain percentage, communication has to go out to membership. When it reaches some lower threshold, communication has to go to the Secretary of State's office. And if it reaches yet a smaller threshold, then the Secretary of State's office is authorized to take some action, which can be dramatic and which would have, in this case, potentially headed off the situation we're in, where you have a really large assessment being placed on the 90 member communities that are a part of school care. So that's where we are today, and I apologize if I've gone through that too fast or missed any critical details, but I'd be happy to answer any questions or provide any more information if any members of the City Council wish. But I will conclude by saying that by reiterating that our guiding light in all of this is to provide those school side employees with good quality health insurance, if at all possible, respecting our contractual obligations to provide them with the insurance that they are entitled to under the collective bargaining agreements, while on the other hand, preparing ourselves in case this risk pool, which has threatened to breach its contract with the city, in case they follow through on that action. And that's where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney McCourt. Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. And thank you, Attorney McCourt. This is certainly unfortunate news. I just want to ensure, for the peace of mind for our teachers and our taxpayers both, that we are hoping for the best and preparing for the worst, but that we're doing all we can. I just wanted to ensure the public that we are. Is that true?
That's absolutely correct. That's always been our mantra moving through this, is to really hope for the best and try to negotiate an agreement with school care that works for everyone, while again, protecting. I mean, this is one of the most critical things that we can address, right? Is the health insurance of our school side employees, and we really that is a huge priority for all of us.
Thank you, Attorney McCord. Does anything in RSA 5B allow school care to fill the reserves through next year's rates rather than looking at an assessment which is entirely taxpayer funded?
Yes, Your Honor, and thank you for that question. RSA 5B:4 specifically authorizes risk pools to collect rates and hold any funds necessary to pay claims, to pay reasonable administration costs, and to pay reserves, as well as excess insurance policies. So they are certainly authorized to, out of those rates, which are borne on a shared basis between the employees and the taxpayers, they are certainly authorized to collect and maintain those reserves, which they had done throughout school care had done throughout their entire existence. As I said, they had a reserve in the amount of $29.5 million, which was built entirely through rate setting. And I will clarify as well that no risk pool in the history of this state, which is an ongoing concern, has ever levied an assessment against its members. This is a novel experience.
Mayor, thank you, Mayor. I just want to confirm that there was no headwind of this. It came up. There was no way we could have anticipated this was going to happen. Had been business as usual, and then suddenly we get this alert that there's this, the $1.57 million is going to be due from the city of Portsmouth to maintain the health care of our teachers, which is really critical.
Yeah, that's right. There'd been no direct communication from school care to its members in advance. I do know that at least as early as November of 2024, school care's management knew that they would be at an operational deficit for this current fiscal year, but did nothing to work with members to increase rates to avoid this really unfortunate circumstance.
Thank you.
Attorney McCord, what was the rate increase last year, if you have that for school care?
I believe 8.9%.
Okay, so it was 8.9% last year. And last year, they were in the process of spending down the $29.5 million of the reserves over a 3-year period. Any idea why they didn't have higher rates last year? Kind of try to head this off at the pass, seeing that we're now at 26% rates increase plus an additional 1.5%, which would, roughly speaking, be a 39% increase in total healthcare spending for our educators and school officials.
Yeah, well, as I said, when we asked school care about it, the first reason that they gave us was that they had this actuarial who had been setting rates at a less than conservative tract. In part as well, it was a decision made by the management of school care to keep rates lower for the members.
And then a follow-up to that, because it's concerning is an understatement in terms of the position that we're in now. Thus far, there's been no, guarantees that the process of assessments wouldn't continue in future years. This is not as we know at the moment, not a one-time thing that we would be asked to produce.
No, I mean, there's no indication of what circumstances under which school care would be authorized or permitted to levy an assessment against its members. As I said, not only is there no statutory or contractual authority for it, it's actually explicitly against their school care's board policies to conduct an assessment as of right now. And just to circle back on my last answer, if I may, school care did increase they did increase their rates. I think it was a 7% increase in the year prior, and they increased it to an 8.9% for this current fiscal year that we're in, which reflected, I believe it was a 2% increase that they were allocating just for their reserves, but clearly it was far from sufficient.
And if we look back over the last 10 years, are we, in terms of the money that we've put in and the money that we've taken out of school care, do we have any sense of whether or not we're in the red, the black, or the green in terms of the amount of money that we've allocated to this risk pool over a 10-year period?
Yes, I believe that the Deputy City Manager Lunny had run those numbers, and I believe he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was in the $1.5 million in the green on that. We had collected about $1.5 million more than we had paid in, $1.5 million more than our claims would have actually required.
Okay. And then the last question, at least for me, in the event, and there has been cases when we've been refunded amounts of money in terms of if claims don't meet the expectation or claims don't come up to the amount that we've charged, where does that money go?
Right. So it's a couple different things. So remember that the payment of these premiums is shared between the taxpayers through the budget process and through the members. So that's shared. It's on a varying basis, but it might be 94% from the taxpayers and 6% from the ratepayers, from the insured. And when those holidays have come back, so the statute does allow if the risk pool collects way more than it collects more than it needs to pay claims for administrative costs, for its reserves, to pay that umbrella insurance. If it collects more than that, then it has to take that money and give it back to its members. That's what the holiday is. And when that comes back to the city, I can only speak for the city's experience. The city gets in its annually we get a rate sheet that we have to sign up for, and on that rate sheet it shows us how the corresponding allocation of that holiday can be given back, I guess, to the insured by lowering their premiums, right, on a corresponding basis. So however much it is for that individual over the course of a year, it's then broken into 12, and then they pay less in through their paycheck for their health insurance on that ongoing basis. For the city side, that money is returned to, I believe it's called the Health Reserve Fund. Stabilization Fund, yes, excuse me. So that's returned to that fund. How that fund works is that all of the units and the parts of the city, the police, fire, school, municipal side, every year they each budget in for how much their health insurance is going to cost on that given year based on a 10-year rolling average. That money's all paid into that fund. And then from that fund, the monthly premiums are paid to Health Trust for the city folks, to school care for the school folks, and so on. It's paid out, right? Now, that's a 10-year rolling average, which is designed to smooth the budget impact for everybody, so that you don't have huge peaks and valleys. It's more on a kind of linear track, and that's that combined fund for kind of everybody. And sometimes some units kind of win out in that because it's the 10-year average, and some other times others lose. But the purpose is stability, and that's the same purpose that risk pools provide, right? You kind of collectively all come together to have way more people in the pool than you would if you just went it alone. So sometimes, to go back to the city paid in $1.5 million than its claims over a 10-year period. Well, that's going to happen sometimes in a pool, right? Sometimes you're going to be extra healthy. Sometimes you're going to be extra sick. But the logic being over time, it all kind of comes out in the wash, and that's true with the stabilization fund. That's true in general with risk pools. It's the logic anyway.
Councillor Cook, then Councillor Tabor.
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, Attorney McCourt, for sharing this information with us. You mentioned that Concord and Londonderry had negotiated alternative payment plans. Was every member offered alternative payment plans?
No, we were not. And well, we were offered their payment. We were not offered to come and negotiate our own payment plan. We were offered the payment plan that Concord and Londonderry negotiated. But when I offered to negotiate another plan, the first instinct was to not negotiate it, but now it seems they are by welcoming us to the board meeting on Wednesday, which again, we have high hopes for.
Thank you.
Counselor Tabor.
Thanks, Attorney McCourt. I'm really glad that this is all out now in public. It's a major factor in next year's budgeting, the 22% price increase. I think we're all concerned about this period from 2023 to now, when the rates were set too low and the reserve was just burned up. I think when we're talking about any kind of relationship moving forward, what are the controls that we need so that that doesn't happen again? You mentioned they've had an actuary who didn't push them to set their rates to anticipate the claims they'd have to pay. You mentioned better information about their net reserve position. I would think we'd want, all the members around the state would want that monthly. And can it be transparent? Can it be an open record? I don't know whether that needs to be confidential or not, but certainly I'd like your thoughts on what are the necessary controls so that never happens again, particularly because if the rates keep running too low and the law that is now going through the legislature allows them to do assessments, this will be a pattern.
Yes, thank you. And, I think, like I mentioned, there are multiple competing bills that are floating around out there at the moment. I have no feel for which one may have legs and which ones may not. That's not really within my job description, but, I have reviewed Senate Bill 661 in a lot of detail, and this has a lot of those kinds of controls that we're talking about, but I don't know that that's going to pass, right? And that's why, I think a strong negotiation with school care and some strong board policies around these kinds of things that we're referencing here is critical. I also want to raise kind of a fundamental point about what school care is, which is they have a board of directors that oversees all their operations, and then there's, I think, supposed to be 14 employees of school care. All those board members, they are, employees of municipalities for the most part. Whether they're on the administration side or on the or not, or union heads or what have you. They're business administrators. They are, other members of the community who all have the same dog in this fight that we all do, I would think. Which is why, again, I hope that on Wednesday we can prevail upon them to institute these kinds of reasonable policies that protect, their employer, the person they actually represent, right, behind the whole board of directors piece. So that's really where I hope. I mean, again, I don't have any specifics on what kinds of policies they're proposing. I guess it's going to be the kind of thing I'm going to have to review once I'm able to see it and bring it back to you all and see if it's enough. But, the concern certainly is that school care would, absent some change in the law, absent some change in their policies, would continue to set low rates, aggressive rates, and that knowing that if push ever came to shove, they could levy an assessment on their members and it would all kind of come out in the wash at that point.
Thanks.
Without a lot of what you're talking about, transparency to the membership, which is the kind of thing that, I think has been lacking here for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy City Attorney McCourt. Appreciate the update. We're now, apologies. We are on to recognitions and volunteer committee reports. The Public Art Review Committee, Park 2025 year-end report.
Your Honor,
I move to accept the Public Art Review Committee 2025 year-end report as presented.
I second.
Thank you, Order. I want to thank the Public Art Review Committee for all the work they do. I'm a huge fan of art. I think that makes Portsmouth just more vibrant. I think it makes all our lives better. I was encouraged to see that they're still going to be talking about some art at some public housing. I know I brought it up before, and I mentioned it to Dwyer, and I just want to reiterate those two canvases that's been staring at me in the face for 42 years on Margerston Apartments. But I just think those would be two perfect spots to welcome people into the city. I just think they're two great spots for art. So I'd hope the committee would continue to try to work with the PHA and see if anything can be done there. But thank you.
Councilor Buck, and agree to the park. Appreciate all the hard work. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm fortunate to serve as the City Council liaison to the Public Art Review Committee. This group of individuals are extremely hardworking. They do a lot of work behind the scenes that people don't always see, between working with our schools to see if we can promote more art in our school setting, but also working to provide more appreciation for the art that we already have within the city, including all the public art around town, but also the collections that we have in the community that we don't always see, by moving them to places where they're more visible. So I really appreciate the work they're doing, and I'm excited to see what they do in the next year.
Indeed. All in favor? Roll call vote?
All right. Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Yes?
Councilor Cook.
Yes.
Councilor Tabor.
Yes.
Councilor Blaylock.
Yes.
Councilor Bagley.
Yes.
Councilor Moreau.
Yes.
Councilor Flynn.
Yes.
Councilor Hopkins.
Yes.
Councilor, sorry, Mayor McCachran.
Yes.
Unanimous.
June. Next, we move to public comment. First, Mary Lou McElwain on the topic of Kelly.
Thank you. Good evening, all. Mary Lou McElwain, 259 South Street. And I just want to say that I'm sad to know that Kelly Barnaby is no longer employed by the city of Portsmouth. I found Kelly very knowledgeable, competent, and very easy to work with. And each time she took a call from, I was at Ward 5, she responded with alacrity. And if she had to come down and answer our questions, it was always with a smile and knowledge base that the rest of us didn't have. So she's going to be missed after 38 years here. I felt that Kelly was the face of City Hall, actually. And even though she's a tiny woman, I think she's leaving a large pair of shoes to be filled. So she will be missed.
You're here. Next, Pobo on Councilor Hopkins' motion.
Good evening. I'm going to be very brief. This is Ann Pubo, 160 Bartlett Street. I'm speaking in support of Councillor Annie Hopkins' motion to create a bicycle and pedestrian blue ribbon committee tonight. This is a practical, low-cost way to keep momentum going on the updated bicycle and pedestrian plan. So I urge the council to support this effort to improve safe, accessible transportation for everyone in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Next is Don Margeson on Kelly Barnaby.
Hello. I just wanted to add to Mary Lou's words of appreciation for the service of Kelly Barnaby as the city clerk. I first met her, or not met her, but saw her when I came to a council meeting early after returning to Portsmouth after retirement in 2012, and I saw her doing staff work for the council, which included trying to keep up with council members' discussions of amendments to the ordinance, let's say, that was before them. And that I felt very empathetic towards her because that's the kind of thing that I had done in my professional career. Later, I became more closely connected with Kelly when I became the clerk in my ward, the election clerk. And she was wonderful. She gave us our marching orders very clearly, but with the promise of help when we needed it. And she never had to bid for the respect of the board, the election workers, because we knew that she had our backs when things went down, maybe a little bit downhill at the election. She would help out with problems procedural. She would help with on demand for problems mechanical. And so we knew that we were going, she would sail the ship, the election ship home at the end of the day. And we appreciated that very much in her. So thank you very much for the opportunity of expressing my appreciation for her work. A great civil employee.
Thank you, Don. Next is Beth Martinson, also on Kelly Barnaby.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I add my voice to Mary Lou McElwain and my husband, Beth Margison. I live at 24 Marcy Street with my husband and our children. And Kelly Barnaby was the face of City Hall. And whenever I entered this building, whether as a regular citizen or as a moderator for Citizens Voter Education, and then as a member of the ZBA, she was always unfailingly helpful. She was knowledgeable. She was pleasant. She exemplified the absolute best of public service, and I just want to thank her for 38 years of service to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Next is Peter Huda on Kelly Barnaby.
Peter Huda, Portsmouth. I would just like to personally thank Kelly Barnaby for her 38 years of service. She was a pleasure to work with. She was very competent. She always answered your questions, and she was always a smiling face when you went over there. I worked with her quite a bit when I was on council, and I really enjoyed it, and I always felt like I got the answer that was correct. So I'd like to just thank her and say from the rest of us, she will be missed greatly. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, Petra. Next is Matt Glenn on the Bike Ped Committee.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Matt Glenn, 34 Harrison Ave. That's the neighborhood over by that last school to get a sidewalk leading to it. So we're looking forward to that coming, though. I'm here to speak in support of Councilor Hopkins' proposal to form a Bike and Pedestrian Blue Ribbon Committee. Last year, as you know, a great deal of work went into the new bicycle and pedestrian network plan. I served on the working group for that. Without a group of people responsible for implementing it, opportunities will be missed. I think you know that with the issue of housing. You have a housing plan, but you also need a housing committee, sustainability plans, but you need a group of people working towards them. And now with childcare, another effort I support, you're organizing a group of people to work towards that. I know you discussed the last time making some changes to parking and traffic safety. That was 7 months ago that you discussed that. I've seen no changes, no progress. There may be progress happening behind the scenes towards some of those goals in the bike and pedestrian plan, but there's really no way for the public to be aware. So I believe a standalone committee could better tackle the many recommendations of that plan, including many recommendations in there that have nothing to do with pavement. Perhaps you can also make some adjustments to parking and traffic safety to ensure projects that come before them do include bike and pedestrian goals. and that's something else I hope you talk about. But I think asking the PTSC to take on all the goals in that bike and pedestrian plan is really too much. A dedicated group could do that better. So hopefully you've seen in your emails that there are many citizens in this community ready to step up and help. I hope you will listen to them and look forward to the discussion tonight.
Thank you, Matt. Next is Tyler Garzo on the DPW's report on State Street.
Good evening, Tyler Garzo, 62 McKinley. So this is in reference to the upcoming two-way State Street report back in your packet. Downtown Portsmouth is a destination, not a thoroughfare. I am appalled that DPW has come back recommending against a two-way State Street pilot project, despite a favorable engineering report, the original configuration of State Street being two-way prior to the 1957 Hassett Plan, and the many towns in America that have changed from one-way traffic sewers back to two-way, to the massive benefit of the businesses on those streets. DPW's report back shows obvious car bias rather than people focus. It pretends that turning radius defines a city. It demands traffic lights instead of stop signs. It ignores the phrase "as appropriate" in Portsmouth's complete street policy. It pretends that pedestrians are incapable of looking both ways before they cross the street. I think Councillor Hopkins' Bike and Pedestrian Blue Ribbon Committee has become a necessity. Again, downtown Portsmouth is a destination, not a thoroughfare. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Anybody else wishing to speak that didn't sign up? None on Zoom. Thank you for all that did and for the kind words about Kelly. Truly the face of City Hall. Now we have the city manager's items which require action.
Thank you, Your Honor. Item number 1 is approval, as a request for approval of the memorandum of agreement with the Portsmouth Fire Officers Association. And this MOA seeks to correct the pay of 2 internal officers who were recently promoted and allows those 2 officers to progress through the subsequent pay steps and provide this one-time remedy to our current pay inequity that occurs when promotions are contemplated, and we will seek to remedy that through the upcoming collective bargaining agreement.
Your Honor, I make a motion, we move to approve and accept the proposed MOA as presented.
Second?
Any discussion?
All right.
June, can we have a roll call vote?
Yes. Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
Yes.
Counselor Tabor?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
Yes.
Counselor Bagley?
Yes.
Counselor
Stuck up
Moreau?
on you.
Yes.
Counselor Flynn?
Yes.
Counselor Hopkins?
Yes.
Mayor McCackron?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Next, the approval of memorandum of agreement with Portsmouth Police Civilian Employees Association, NEPBA, Local 11.
Right, thank you, Your Honor.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I can read all my headers. This would allow, the passage of this MOA would allow for discretion to place lateral hires on an appropriate vacation schedule following probation. Really what we're trying to get at is to acknowledge that this is one step in a process to try and recruit lateral hires with experience for our remaining and vacant dispatch positions.
Your Honor, I move to approve and accept the proposed MOA as presented.
Second?
All right. Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
Yes.
Counselor Tabor?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
Yes.
Counselor Bagley?
Yes.
Counselor Moreau?
Yes.
Counselor Flynn?
Yes.
Counselor Hopkins?
Yes.
Mayor McCackron?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Third item is a request for acceptance of easements located at 1465 Woodbury Avenue, which is a pad site in front of the Market Basket Plaza along Woodbury Avenue, to be the home of Citizens Bank. At its regularly scheduled meeting back in August of 2025, the Planning Board granted conditional use permits and site plan approval for the construction of a single-story banking facility with a drive-through and associated site improvements. As part of that approval, and as is typical, the Planning Board recommended that the City Council accept a community space easement and an access easement for water services. This community space easement will secure improvements along Woodbury Avenue, including landscaping, trees, walkways, and picnic tables. And the plan proposed is in your packet. The access easement for water services will allow city staff to enter the property for the purpose of leak detection in private water laterals. All city departments who have been involved with this have reviewed the attached easement deeds and recommend their acceptance.
Your Honor, I move to authorize the city manager to accept and approve a community space easement and an access easement for water service in a substantially similar form to the easements contained in the agenda packet.
Second?
Any discussion? We'll have a roll call vote.
Did you guys change your motion? Oh, that's right. That's fine. Okay. Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Yes.
Counselor Cook.
Yes.
Counselor Tabor.
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock.
Yes.
Counselor Bagley.
Yes.
Counselor Moreau.
Yes.
Counselor Flynn.
Yes.
Counselor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor McCackron.
Yes.
Unanimous.
The fourth and final item is a request for acceptance of an easement at 550 Sagamore Avenue. Back in December 19, 2024, the Planning Board granted subdivision and site plan approval for property located at 550 Sagamore Avenue. The Planning Board approved the demolition of an existing single-family residence and the creation of 4 new parcels with associated site improvements, including 3 single-family parcels and a private roadway lot. And as part of that approval, the Planning Board recommended that the Council accept an access easement for water services, which would allow city staff to enter the property for the purpose of leak detection in private water laterals. And as previously mentioned above, in a similar item, all departments in the city have reviewed the attached easement deed and recommend its acceptance.
I'll move to authorize the city manager to accept and approve an access easement for water services in a substantially similar form to the easement contained in the agenda packet.
Second?
Any discussion? Seeing none, June, we'll have a roll call vote.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Yes.
Counselor Cook.
Yes.
Counselor Tabor.
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock.
Yes.
Counselor Bagley.
Yes.
Counselor Moreau.
Yes.
Counselor Flynn.
Yes.
Counselor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor McCackron.
Yes.
Unanimous, Your Honor.
Thank you.
On to the consent agenda.
I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second?
Right. All right. Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Yes.
Counselor Cook.
Yes.
Counselor Tabor.
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock.
Yes.
Counselor Bagley.
Yes.
Counselor Moreau.
Yes.
Counselor Flynn.
Yes.
Counselor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor McCackron.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Now, we've moved on to email correspondence.
I move to accept and place on file.
A second?
All right. 13. Just whizzing on through these. Okay, Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Yes.
Counselor Cook.
Yes.
Counselor Tabor.
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock.
Yes.
Counselor Bagley.
Yes.
Counselor Moreau.
Yes.
Counselor Flynn.
Yes.
Counselor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor McCackron.
Yes.
Unanimous, Your Honor.
Only 18 more to go.
And since I probably was the one that
Thank
got
you,
you sick, June, sitting next to you 2
Here we
weeks
are
ago, I don't have anything under my name, so nothing to vote on. On to Councilor Tabor, Community Power, reading material, and then the Housing Action Plan.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll take up the Housing Action Plan follow-up and save the rest for Councilor Bagley's motion. As one of the recommendations in the Housing Action Plan draft that we adapted was a housing navigator. And I said to the council, I'd like to come back with a way to do that. And I met with the city manager and the planning staff, and I encountered a group that was very eager to take this on themselves as the highest one of the major goals, if not the largest goal of our strategic plan for the term. To the point that they are actually looking at realigning how the staff works to create capacity to get the housing action plan done and see it through. So we then talked about what the work process should be to get this done by a deadline of July that we've set. And we talked about, we've stood up, where we've approved the housing committee for this term. It's got some open positions, but it would make sense, we thought, if we took the 130 recommendations of the draft that we've got from Progress Portsmouth and started to cull those for which ones won't really have an immediate impact, and then rate them for which would have the largest impact, and also rate them for which would have the most feasibility. And it made some sense to have the housing committee to do that. It could also be something the planning board does. So we began to explore the questions of what's the work process to get this housing action plan really set to go. And at that point, I concluded that it would make sense to ask the city manager to come back to us, and she offered to do this right away, March 16th, with how she and the planning staff want to organize themselves to really go after this, and then how they would work with the boards and committees. I think, you know, the housing committee that we had last year, the Blue Ribbon Committee that Assistant Mayor and I chaired, was focused around Sherburne, and if it continues to be the way we develop housing policy recommendations, it needs to be focused away from Sherburne and onto broad policy goals. So I'd welcome people's thoughts on that, and I think the city manager would welcome people's thoughts on that. And then the motion I would propose is I would move to request the city manager report back March 16th on how the planning and sustainability staff will implement creation of a housing action plan by July, working with boards and committees. And if I get a second.
Second.
That's what I would propose.
Any further discussion? Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, Councilor Tabor, for being very proactive and making sure that this process moves along quickly. I truly appreciate the work that you've done with this, and I think the motion is perfect to make sure that we are aligning this with what the staff can do and what the city manager wants to do as far as directing the staff.
I think it's a great idea. I do think that the focus should be on broad policy and how I like the idea of rating certain things and trying to figure out what could be put at the top of the list. I do think looping in the planning board, especially on recommendations around zoning and getting their opinion on that, would be important as well. So I agree with everything and think that that's a great direction to head into and to get the feedback from the appropriate parties and staff.
Yeah. And Councilor Cook, you were nice to say perfect. I don't think we're ever perfect. But we're always trying. Another question is, how do we involve the housing advocates who have done a lot of work on this? I think they have a real ability to do outreach. I've spoken with them about that. But they also have a wealth of good ideas and involve key people from various housing advocacy groups around not just Portsmouth, but the Seacoast. So that's a question I'd ask too.
Councilor Moreau.
I've actually attended at least one of the Home for All meetings, which contain that group of folks in it. They are actually currently organizing a week to be focused in May on affordability, and they already have a bunch of events, even some happening here in Portsmouth. I think I've actually personally been trying to recruit some of them for the Housing Committee, so that happen to be Portsmouth residents. Been working very hard on that, so I think that if we could actually get a few of those members to actually serve on the Housing Committee, I think it would be, because some of them do live here, it would be a really great asset to the Housing Committee to really have that access to that group. They have a lot of great ideas, and I hope that we will, continue to participate in. I believe their next meeting is on April 9th. I'm going to try to attend that one. So I think we have a lot of good positivity in that direction.
And we hope for another planning board representative on our housing committee, too.
Are you talking about me?
I'm just winking.
Well, I already thought I was. I offered.
Didn't you get a letter saying that?
Well, no, because I'm the city council rep, so it's different.
Well, thank you again for bringing this forward. I think that it's a good, certainly a good balance of having another committee, having another plan, but also incorporating it with the very capable staff that when we ever speak to, is incredibly invested on the issue. There is not a single person in the planning department that's not thinking about how to make it easier for folks to live here, to make the rules make sense, and to offer amendments to the zoning that incorporates all of their expertise on that. And by pulling them in, it certainly saves a step of, gee, I'd like to do that. I hope it works out to be able to kind of funnel those things like, hey, here's where we are, and this is what we can do in those, and then to push that envelope is an awesome thing. So thanks for incorporating the current staff. Thanks to the current staff. After a conversation with the city manager to agree to be a part of this, I think it's going to save us a lot of time in terms of a plan that will be actionable and already incorporated into the vision of the city. So with that, and I tried to,
Roll call.
well, I was trying to, string it along so June got her voice back.
Not today. All right. Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Yes.
Counselor Cook.
Yes.
Counselor Tabor.
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock.
Yes.
Counselor Bagley.
Yes.
Counselor Moreau.
Yes.
Counselor Flynn.
Yes.
Counselor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor McEachran.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Delightful. And we still have open applications for the housing committee. Just have to throw it out there.
All right, we're on to Councilor Bagley. Councilor Tabor's community power reading material is in the packet. And Councilor Bagley.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to move that the City Council request the City Manager prepare and present a report outlining the process, timelining, financial implications, and contractual considerations associated with withdrawing from community power. If I get a second, I'll speak to it.
Second.
So originally in the packet, there was a memo and a copy of the postcard that was sent out, but I know the packet was revised, and it would appear that it is no longer in the packet online. But I'll do a quick recap. In roughly December or January, we got news that for the third consecutive 6-month rate period, community power would be more expensive than the default Eversource rate. This time considerably so, about 30% higher. What has also concurrently been happening is community power had some challenging decisions made with a bankrupt company. They ended up roughly $8 million in the hole. They got rid of their CEO. They've been working without a CEO or financial director for about the last year. I think they're close to hiring one now. They do have an acting CEO, but taking a deeper dive into this, the plan to get back to competitive rates seems to be, we'll get some new people in here, they'll take a look at it, and they'll find a path forward, which I found unsettling. That on its face, I don't think was enough to consider leaving community power. But when I did further research, I was very disturbed to find out that over the last 16 months, they have not been refreshing. And what refreshing means is when somebody moves to Portsmouth and they set up a new electricity account, they default to Eversource. And they don't get defaulted to community or opt in to community power until refresh happens. For some reason, the refreshes haven't happened in, I believe it's 16 months. And we have roughly 2,450 residents who are currently getting the cheaper Eversource rate that community power has now decided at this point to refresh in on a rolling basis over the month of March. So starting this month, roughly 2,500 residents are going to see a 30% increase in their power supply. Now, about 10 communities, including, I believe, Nashua, paused this refresh so that residents wouldn't be brought on board during a time when power is substantially more expensive than the rate they are currently paying. Portsmouth did not choose to do this. I think that was a mistake. I think at the very least we should have been informed of this at the council level and had the opportunity to make a decision. We would have had to make our decision on December 31st or sooner. I only learned of this near the end of February. The more research I do into community power, the less confidence that I have in it as an organization. I think the people there mean well. I think they're doing the best they can. But the power industry is extraordinarily complex. State laws have been changed in the last couple of years to make Eversource, Unitel, and the default supplier up north much more competitive than they used to be. I think in the future, or in the foreseeable future, I don't anticipate Eversource rates being more expensive than community power. Right now, we're doing a 2-cent adder, which is to build up reserves. They anticipate the projected reserves for community power will be 30 million by 2028, and they'd like to achieve 60 million in reserves by 2030. In order to get those reserves, there has to be an adder to the default electric price. So not only will we be paying what the negotiated rate is, which is the dynamic part, but we'll also be paying this adder in to build reserves. For those of us that came onto community power several years ago when the council voted it in, we've to date saved money. So initially we saved a lot of money on our power bills. The last 2 terms and this going forward term, it's going to be about break even. But I'm really concerned for the 2,500 residents that didn't get the chance to save money because they've only moved to town in the last 16 months that now will be paying this substantially higher rate. I don't believe they should have been opt-in given the circumstances. I believe we should have taken the approach that other communities have and not refreshed our residents unless community power rates were competitive. I know that's a lot, but it's been a lot of research over the last 2 weeks.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley. Councilor Tabor.
Thanks, Your Honor. I think I'll take the postcard first and then talk about the motion. It's true that we missed the detail about being able to not refresh people. That rollout was at a December board meeting of the Community Power Coalition. Our representative was unable to attend that. And when our Energy Committee met, one of our members, Kevin Charette, had dug into this himself. And he said, these folks are going to get a rate increase. And very important with community power, you can opt out at any time. Any person can opt out at any time. It's really simple. It's about 5 clicks. So we first contacted the Community Power Coalition and said, can we pause this? That we were talking to them February 2nd. They said, nope, the deadline was January 31st. So we said, well, what can we do to protect our residents? And we also learned that it was a large number, that this refresh hadn't happened, as you mentioned. So we had, at the February 3rd meeting, we decided to follow up to our users and say, here's, your rate will be higher, and that's what the postcard says, and here's how you change, and you need to act before March 1st to avoid having a rate increase. We thought it was very important to do that. The alternative was to let people have this rate increase happen, see it in their April bill, and no one had ever told them that they had the option to not do this. So we wrote some copy that night at the meeting. I met with the city manager. She understood the problem quickly and said that she and Monty and the communications team would take it from there, and that's what they did. I think it was the right decision then. I still think it was the right decision to tell people they can opt out. Do I wish we had more clarity? Because we're a community with a lot of rentals, we have a lot of turnover. And because we have a lot of turnover, in a period of, I don't know if it was 16 months, I know it was 8 or 12, that can lead to a lot of new people in the market. So, but if you don't mind, Mayor, I'll take 3 minutes or 4 minutes to talk about the motion. I've been thinking about it over the weekend, and I think I would suggest to the maker of the motion we focus on the evaluation of community power, as you talk about, rather than go right to withdrawing. CPCNH is now 50 towns and cities around the state. Its goal is to serve those communities by trying to get the best rate, and also it's the only option in your electric supply that you can get more green options, and it has a long-term plan to be make a market in green power. Those are things that Eversource doesn't do. In the first couple of years, 2023, people saved $1.5 million, then $1.2 million the next year, and then lost $800,000 versus Eversource. So as you say, we're money ahead at this point. Then the coalition contracted with a wood chip plant operator up in Berlin for power that defaulted, and that lowered the reserve. So they made the hard decision, and I think the right decision, to go up 2 cents in the rate to rebuild the reserve. There is a plan to do that. If you look at the P&Ls, which are public, you can see that it's working, that the margin is healthy. And the general manager of CPCNH says that that 2 cents will taper down as the reserve builds, and they're hoping to get a $10 million reserve at the end of the year. So, and at the same time, we've had changes in regulation that Councilor Bagley referred to. The PUC pushed the utilities by requiring them to go into the spot market. And I put in the packet the consumer advocate's opinion on that. He said he was very concerned about this, that Eversource and Liberty and Unitil were being required to go into the day-to-day spot market and buy power with no control over the pricing, no hedging. And we have a great energy committee with some real experts, and several of them are from the industry and know the markets, and they make it pretty clear that right now Eversource is paying a lot more for its power than it's charging, particularly this winter. So they will have to come back in the next rate period and recover those losses, the PUC is requiring them to recoup those losses and not kick the can forward. So I think it's possible, I think it's probable that the gap will narrow in the rates. And on top of that, there's additional legislation happening in Concord, which would sort of create the same rules for all the players. So long story short, the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire exists only to benefit the members. I think they have a plan to rebuild their reserve. I think that plan is visibly working. The competitors, the competition is good. And I think in the long term, when you have 40% of the customers of the state aggregated together, as the consumer advocate says, long term, this should benefit consumers. So then we get to the question of, is it wise to withdraw? And I think I would say, do we know enough to make a decision to withdraw? And this is where I come back to evaluation of community power participation. I would see if the maker of the motion would instead make a motion that the council and the Energy Advisory Committee have a work session with community power and ask these hard questions. We are contracted to be part of this organization. It seems to me we shouldn't be necessarily talking about withdrawing or researching withdrawing before we talk to them. And we understand the pros and cons.
Councilor Bagley.
Thanks, Your Honor. And thank you, Councilor Tabor. First, I'd like to point out that my motion is to request a report back from the city manager, not to withdraw, such as the city of Bow did a few days ago. And secondly, I did initially ask for a work session. You did ask me to amend my motion to remove the work session. So I'm not opposed to a work session, but I mean, that was my original intent. So I'd be happy to amend the motion to include a work session. You know, Henry Reardon did reach out based on a graph that they presented to the city of Nashua showing a trend line. And he mentioned, you know, the trend line was before Winter Storm Fern, and the following weeks of persistent cold weather drove ISO New England prices to record highs. Why the shape of the graph of community reserves over time is directionally correct. This forecast was produced before the Fern storm impact. A more current graph would show a lower January 26 bottom. So the headwinds that Eversource and other energy suppliers are facing are also faced by community power. And we're not talking about an insignificant amount of money. My calculation is residents of Portsmouth who don't opt out of community power collectively will pay $1.6 million over the next 6 months. And you know, for me personally, I've opted out of community power, and it is 5 clicks, and I'm fairly technically savvy, and it probably took me 10 minutes. I tried to do it on the Eversource website. You actually have to do it on the community power website with your Eversource credentials. The reason I think community power made sense is because of our residents who are not as technically sophisticated or are not aware of these options in the energy market, which have existed for a long time. It didn't make sense that you can buy your electricity from somebody other than the person who is, you know, supplying the telephone poles and the wires. I mean, I feel like most people think the fact that we can buy our electricity from somebody other than Eversource is a little bit strange to begin with. And that's why I thought it made sense for the council to vote to save our residents money, because by and large, most people aren't going to opt for a different electrical supplier. And I think that is still the case. And that's why I'm so against us opting in these extra 2,500 residents. And we did send them a postcard, but before we sent them a postcard, Community Power sent a postcard. And they said you're getting opted into community power, but they made no mention of the rate differential. And then we make a reference to the rate differential, but we do it on the back. The front talks about how great community power is, but there's no mention that the rate will be higher. It's not until you get on the back, and then it doesn't say percentage-wise. It just says, you know, Eversource is 11.3 cents and community power is 14.663 cents. which, if you don't do the math, doesn't sound that significant, but when you do the math, it's a 30% change, which I think with the size of electricity bills, it is significant. So I do admit that community power is a good concept. I do agree with your points that, you know, it does make sense, but I don't agree that we should be forcing our residents into community power. I think that's a choice they should be able to opt into if they think it makes sense for them. I don't think it's competitive enough that we should force people into community power and force them to opt out when they may not have the technical ability to do so.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I was fortunate to serve on the Blue Ribbon Energy Advisory Committee with Councilor Tabor and with the current members, many of the current members who are sitting on the Energy Advisory Committee. These individuals are experts in the field. Many of them work for utilities, have worked for utilities. They understand the markets better than, I think I'm comfortable saying, than any one of us in the council really truly understands the markets or how this all works. And I think it's also important to remember that we've been members of Community Power for longer than just the last 3 rate setting cycles. In fact, the city has saved quite a bit of money, and residents have saved quite a bit of money as being part of Community Power. I'm one of those individuals that opted out. So I don't pay the default rate with Community Power. I pay the higher rate for renewable energy. And for the last 18 years, I've always used an alternative energy supplier rather than using Eversource. I've never actually used Eversource as my energy supplier, except for the month I move into my house. I moved into my house, and that becomes your default, and then you have to choose an energy supplier. Part of the reason is that the New England market is particularly difficult for energy supply. It's very unusual. It's one of the highest markets in the country. The rest of the country has much lower costs when it comes to energy. Community Power has helped to change that market and has helped to change the way that the PUC has actually governed energy within the state and energy buying within the state. And part of the reason is that Community Power has a huge buying market with 50 member communities at this point. That makes them one of the largest power suppliers. And so they can help drive change in the energy market in the state of New Hampshire, which is absolutely critical, because prior to the creation of these alternatives in the state, you only could go and buy on the private market from energy suppliers that were for profit. So I always bought my energy from companies like Direct Energy. These are for-profit companies, so their rates also reflected that need to make money, whereas Community Power is not a for-profit entity. It's an entity that benefits its members and therefore builds reserves, and those reserves over time can be used and will be used by member entities. Now, that's not in the immediate term, it's in the long term, but it helps those communities build the capacity to have higher energy efficiency measures within their community later and to invest in their community. So I think it's really important as a community with a climate action plan to be offering this kind of energy supply to community members, and they can opt out. I think that our community is full of individuals that are incredibly savvy and very capable of opting out of Community Power if they don't want to have Community Power, and very capable of opting in to other suppliers if they prefer those suppliers, because that's what I'd always done. And I was not the most knowledgeable person about energy supply. So, but I would turn for advice first and foremost to the individuals sitting on our Energy Advisory Committee, because they really truly are experts. And Councilor Tabor has done a wonderful job leading them. And so if we had any recommendation to make changes, I would be looking to them for those recommendations.
A couple of points. I wouldn't be opposed to having the report on the costs, et cetera, for the work session. I mean, I think you value the costs against the benefit when you're making any decision, so I don't think getting the costs associated, the work that would go into it, would be something that we necessarily wouldn't want for a work session, because that would be weighted against that. Just a couple of points on the conversation of energy prices, and just one direct correction in terms of a power company, us contracting with a different power company. Like there's a supply and there's a delivery charge. Eversource is paid on the delivery to deliver the power. That's why they still come out and fix the poles when a squirrel kind of jumps onto a transformer, kills themselves, and knocks out our power at an inconvenient time. They're out there within minutes, and they're still a huge partner of the city of Portsmouth because they maintain all of those things. I think from a standpoint of, it's very interesting that not putting any correlation into this, but the idea that 50 communities organized across New Hampshire, and all of a sudden, Eversource is more competitive in terms of rates on the supply side versus the delivery side means that one could assume that it's working to have competition and for us to be able to deliver a larger buying part of this. We're about to potentially go into some really uncharted territory in terms of energy prices with the Strait of Hormuz, potentially closing, liquid natural gas potentially being disrupted. That's in addition to all the Russia, Ukraine stuff. There's a lot of geopolitical risk right now that's about to enter the market, and to be able to have a clear head on this. One thing I do agree on, though, is that, being able to opt out of that, would love to see that process made even easier, and to get the data on the amount of people that have opted up, like Councilor Cook, in terms of Portsmouth, to see, how many people would be pulling off of this and putting on another one that have opted into, the higher rates of, that are willing to pay more to invest in community power and invest in, more renewable energy. And so there's a lot that would go into this. I'm not, again, opposed to getting the cost associated with going out of this, but I would like to have the conversation, as you're welcome to have, or as you're amenable to have, in terms of the total cost, because if every community leaves and Eversource is looking at very high delivery charges, it's difficult to say that, we wouldn't be back in a situation where we also have very high supply charges as well. And so would like to know our negotiating power, and if there is if there's changes that we could make for community power, which is a buying, portion of this, to pull into their, to their organization charter, that, I would love for everybody to make the decision to opt up to a higher, more expensive energy source so that they can support renewables. We know that that's not a choice that everybody can make. And so for the priorities of community power to consistently be directed towards providing the lowest cost energy so that we can pool our buying power, so that people that are in a position to make the decision can make that decision, would be a fantastic. So being able to talk about potentially some changes to the direction of community power to be focused, 100% on, delivering the lowest possible rate to consumers, even if that means delaying some of their options or increasing those 100% green options there. But I'm now talking way past the motion in terms of, fully support being able to have the work session with any information the city manager may be able to provide.
So I guess I would like to amend my motion to include the work session with the Energy Committee. The second would agree.
I agree.
And Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, do you want a representative from them as well?
I think that makes sense. And then just quickly to the mayor's point or question, they do have, since we joined Community Power to the end of December, the opt rates 0.5% to the lowest tier green power, 0.8% of users to the mid-tier of green power, and 1.2% to the highest tier of 100% green power. So 2.5% of our residents have opted for a more green option than the default New Hampshire rate.
Say that, just those numbers again, because it was...
Yeah, so you have the Granite Basic, which is the state mandated rate. And then you have Granite Plus.
And how much was that?
I think is 33%, Clean 50, which I assume is 50%, and Clean 100. And the percentages of Portsmouth residents, it's broken down by town. for the slightly greener is a 0.5%. For the 75% or clean is 0.8%.
Oh, okay, okay, 2.3,
And for the,
got it.
the most green energy is 1.2% of our
Okay.
users.
So total in out of 100%, 2.98%, or 97.5% are on granite basic.
Yes,
Got
and 2.5% have chosen a cleaner solution.
Could we just clarify the amendment to your motion to help out the clerk here? Are you withdrawing your request for the city manager, or are you just adding in?
Adding in, because I think it's good to have that info. I'm not saying we take action on that info. I'm just saying, let's get the data.
Just trying to clarify.
Yeah.
For the motion.
Okay.
So the motion would be as presented with the addition that we have a work session with the city council, the energy committee, and representative or representatives of Community Power New Hampshire.
Okay. So, yep, the Permanent Energy Advisory Committee and the New Hampshire Coalition.
Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire is their formal name.
Okay.
CPCNH.
Thank you.
Okay. And,
Go ahead.
sorry, Councilor Tabor. Assuming since we're keeping the city manager's piece, city manager Kennard, you'd come back with a date and meet. Is that correct? Okay. Awesome. Okay. And then a second to that?
Yes, I agree.
Any further discussion? We have a work session and the preparation of what it would mean, outlining the process, timeline, financial implications, and contractual considerations associated with withdrawing from Community Power as a report back to be delivered at the same time as that work session. I'm assuming.
That would be ideal.
Yeah, we should get it at least at the same time before, not after.
And just one more comment, if you will, Mayor. The rate's not going to change for 6 months. I just know that there's a huge urgency. We don't need to do this next week. Let's get it right, so to speak.
Certainly, yep. And while I appreciate, being able to pull some of the, folks out of there, like, as a decision, like, we have to decide as a city who we're opting in. I think it would be difficult for us to, I credit Nashua for making that decision, but, if we're pulling folks out of it and they're not being rolled into it, it's going to create a spiral for that organization, one. And two, I don't think it's fair for us, to make a decision for some, and I appreciate that other communities did, but to say, hey, we believe in this for those that are already on it. You make a good point in that they've already saved money, but I think as a city, we have to decide, what we're doing, long-term, because either we commit to that or we don't, because we're going to be looking at 18 months with the same set of eyes being like, hey, well, there's more to roll in. We have to be able to make a consistent decision across all of our residents, from my opinion, but certainly understand. Councilor Tabor.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, thank you for agreeing to amend the motion. As I say, I think, do we know enough to make any decision about withdrawing? We've got, the reason I value the work session is this is all very dynamic, right? The regulation has changed in 2025. It will change again in 2026. The strategies that people are using to buy power are changing. CPCNH is working on rebuilding its reserve. We need to understand all of that, not just in the short term when we're rate disadvantaged, but in the long term. The long term, as the consumer advocate says, this aggregation of 40% of the power users of the state should deliver, effective savings. Now, we have to learn at that work session how that proposition holds up. And I think we have to understand all that first before we do anything directionally in terms of staying or going. So I think that work session is critical. I would just also point out that similar, CPCNH has been in front of the City Council in Nashua, dealing also with Dover. of the 50 towns, none have withdrawn. Bow is talking about it, but they haven't acted. And that's in a period that the rates are not advantageous in the short term. And the last thought and we've spent time on this, but I think it's important. When people are paying 2 cents more, that's building a reserve for the citizens of Portsmouth. It's not going to a company's bottom line. And by building that reserve, it's eliminating the need to use a line of credit. That enables the power purchasing to cost less. And it also enables the coalition to be able to buy the portfolio of energy contracts more effectively. They have to hedge almost everything right now because the reserve is not as big as it needs to be. So they'll get more flexibility that way. That's complex, but that's the reason the work session is valuable, and I'm grateful for that.
Councillor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll support the motion with the work session only because I think it's valuable for people to have more information about how CB-CNH operates, and I think it's also valuable for us to meet with the Energy Advisory Committee because they are incredible experts, and to hear from them, I think that will reassure a lot of members of the council that we are working with experts, and we're very fortunate to have them serving. So I think it's always valuable to have more information for our community members. So I don't think information hurts, but then again, I'll still be looking for any recommendations to come from the Energy Advisory Committee.
Yeah, well, we will need a roll call. Yeah, look forward to the work session in terms of, certainly understanding options that are available under, whether or not there's an option to provide, those customers that would not want to opt into the 2% or the 2 cent increase. Is that an option that's on the table for member organizations? Would like to know, what exists as a part of this, knowing that it has to be able to, if it's going to be our default, it has to be focused on delivering the lowest rates that are possible. And again, that is why it was such a, why 50 communities signed up, because of what, a lack of ability to rate set effectively from Eversource here, having to wait, 3 or 6 months before doing it. Like, that's how it got the buy-in across the state, and so that has to still be at the top, but we'll support this and look forward to the work session. Roll call vote, please.
Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Councillor Cook?
Yes.
Councillor Daber?
Yes.
Councillor Blaylock?
Yes.
Councillor Bagley?
Yes.
Councillor Moreau?
Yes.
Councillor Flynn?
Yes.
Councillor Hopkins?
Yes.
Mayor McCachran?
Yes.
Unanimous.
All right, Councillor Hopkins, you are up.
All right, thank you, June. I'm sorry for the roll call when you're not feeling well. Thank you, Mayor. So I would like to bring forward this item to talk about establishing a bike and pedestrian advisory committee to support the implementation of Portsmouth's adopted bicycle and pedestrian network plan and complete streets policy. So I'll keep this concise given the strong community input that the council has already received from the 25+ residents who emailed in support of this agenda item and a couple of folks who showed up in person to support this item. I just love that Portsmouth is so full of people who value moving through our city under their own power. So I'm just giving a big shout out to our bike commuters, neighborhood walkers, regional trail users, stroller pushers, and fresh air enthusiasts. Your voices make our work clearer and easier, and I'm really grateful for your engagement on this. So over the past decade, Portsmouth has repeatedly affirmed that walking and bicycling are important parts of our transportation system. We adopted Complete Streets in 2013, we adopted a bike ped plan in 2014, and we implemented the corridor improvements such as Middle Street with the Safe Routes to School funding. And last year in August, the council accepted an updated bicycle and pedestrian network plan. So the question before us is not whether Portsmouth supports biking and walking. We do. But the question is whether we have the right civic structure to implement what we've already adopted. The Parking and Traffic Safety Committee plays an essential role in Portsmouth. It manages parking supply, curb regulation, vehicle traffic operations across the city. But the Bicycle and Pedestrian Network Plan calls for ongoing network planning, connectivity review, multimodal design input, and early public engagement, functions that just extend beyond PTS's traditional scope and workload. And at the August 25 council discussion, the idea was raised that adding a bicycle and pedestrian representative seat to PTS might be a simpler alternative to than creating a bike ped advisory committee. And while adding a multimodal perspective to parking, traffic, and safety could certainly be helpful in its own regard, you know, in the context of parking and traffic decisions, I think, you know, a representative of the bike community would be an asset. But I just want to be clear that representation and implementation are not the same thing. Parking, traffic, and safety is a regulatory and operational body focused on parking and vehicle-related curb use, not long-range multimodal planning or network design. Adding a bike ped representative to parking and traffic would not provide the dedicated advisory structure needed to implement the bike ped plan. So the plan update that this council accepted explicitly recommends establishing a standing bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee, indicating that representation within existing committees alone is not sufficient to support ongoing network planning, engagement, implementation, and progress tracking. If Portsmouth's goal were only signage, lane markings, or minor operational adjustments, then parking, traffic, and safety with a bicycle and pedestrian seat might be sufficient. But Portsmouth has adopted complete streets, a bicycle and pedestrian plan, and an updated plan. These are broad strategic frameworks, and they require strategic governance. Implementing a bicycle and pedestrian network requires ongoing work streams that other committees may touch upon, but do not comprehensively perform, including regional network prioritization, connectivity analysis, grant tracking, corridor review, public engagement, progress monitoring, and plan updates. A bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee would complement, not replace, the work of parking and traffic safety by addressing multimodal transportation at the network and policy level, while parking traffic safety continues its important role in parking and traffic operations. So ultimately, this is a question of alignment. We've adopted complete streets, the bike ped plan, and in that plan, it calls for a standing advisory committee. So establishing a bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee aligns our governance structure with these adopted policies and plans, and it provides a consistent and transparent pathway for implementation. So I would ask for your support in raising a blue ribbon bike ped committee, and I'm open to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Any discussion?
Need a motion.
We need a motion.
Oh, so can I give a motion?
You can, yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I move that the City Council establish a blue ribbon committee to support the implementation, evaluation, and public engagement related to Portsmouth bicycle and pedestrian network plan and complete streets policy.
Second.
Any further discussion? Councillor Bagley?
Thank you, Aaron. Just, I guess, a couple questions. One, how often would this committee probably need to meet? And two, having formerly been on PTS, one of the challenges we had is sometimes things fall under the purview of the, say, the planning board, and then PTS is kind of an after-the-fact committee. How do you propose making sure that the committees are not doubling the work, so to speak? Or is that something yet to be determined?
Well, to answer your first question, I think it can be a lower lift committee, maybe quarterly. I don't think monthly is necessary. And to your second point, you are looking at someone who is on both sustainability and parking, traffic, and safety. So as far as duplication of efforts, I would be a through line for that. I think when we look at the makeup of a bike ped committee, including planning board and reporting, regularly to Parking, Traffic, and Safety, because there are a lot of things that would overlap. But to me, it's still apples and oranges. They're both fruit, but they're not the same thing. And I think Parking, Traffic, and Safety already has enough on its plate and does an excellent job with that, I just don't think that it's fair to Parking, Traffic, and Safety or the bike ped plan to try to congeal those two together. Does that answer?
Yes.
Councilor Bullock.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Councilor Hopkins, for bringing this up. I always am supportive of increasing our safety and our bicycle and pedestrian pathways, or encouraging it, supporting it, promoting it. I always think when you see more people doing it, others just kind of join the group, and becomes the trend. If everyone biked here and you were the only one that didn't, maybe you feel like you're going to bike next time. And I also, the kids I coach, you know what I mean? I always encourage them to ride their bikes to practice. And some of them sometimes say they don't feel comfortable or they don't feel safe riding from their house to the field or to the school. But I think having a committee that would, implement action and try to make this a priority is important.
Thank you, Councilor Bullock. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Councilor Hopkins, for introducing the idea of creating a blue ribbon committee to address the bicycle and pedestrian plan in particular. I think that this idea is long overdue. In fact, for too long, the city has relied on an outside advocacy organization, the Seacoast Area Bike Riders, to really be the advocates in our community for the bike ped plan. Without enough voice, I think, in the room for that are sitting at the table and making the decisions around bicycle safety and pedestrian safety in the community. I think this provides us an opportunity to actually have people sitting and making decisions at the city level around these issues without asking an outside advocacy organization to carry that load. And I think that they've done a fantastic job doing it, and I expect to still see them at all the meetings and for them to show up at PTS. But I think that we need a bigger voice in the room for bicycle safety. I know for a long time, I was really uncomfortable letting my child, as a teenager, ride a bike in my neighborhood because I live in a neighborhood with very narrow streets where people drive very quickly, and that's all evidenced by Marcy Street. Everybody knows that every telephone pole in Marcy Street has a notch out of it where people's mirrors have hit the telephone poles because it's a narrow street and people are still driving too quickly. That makes it incredibly unsafe for bicyclists and sometimes even for pedestrians crossing the street because people can't see over the hill when they're coming over the hill too quickly. So it's about having the city sit down and actually look at things like that more deliberately rather than looking at them when we're just talking about traffic on Marcy Street. We need to be talking about plans for ways that we can make it safer for bicyclists and pedestrians in the community aside from when we're talking just about streets. So thank you, Councilor Hopkins. I'm excited to see this committee seated and starting to do its work.
Mayor, I just want to say the tsunami of emails, being new to this, that came in today was impressive. I thought, wow, the people have spoken. This is something that's so exciting. So thank you to Councilor Hopkins. Yeah, seems very popular.
So a couple of questions, and thank you, Councilor Hopkins, and thank you to the emails that came in. SABRE is as an effective organization as that we have in the city, and certainly is able to get the message to the council. I'm not opposed to having any committee. We can create as many committees as we want. I've always just wondered how the committee is going to ultimately to make the changes. It comes either to the council or to the planning board or to PTS, less so maybe to PTS because they're dealing with other things in terms of traffic safety and parking. We're in a unique position right now in that we have a master plan that's occurring and being deliberated. I just want to make sure that the committee doesn't create a report, finds that report to be in conflict with something else that we prioritize in the city, and nothing happens from it. And so, having a blue-ribbon committee is certainly fine. I was trying to look up in the charter whether or not if PTS feeling as though the workload was too high could have created a subcommittee outside of itself. I don't actually know the answer to that. Maybe the city attorney?
I'd have to look at that.
You have to look at that, but I could have asked you before the meeting,
Yeah.
and you could have worked through it during this. But being able to have a subcommittee of PTS would one way, but then again, maybe it doesn't come through PTS. I think the area that it makes the most sense in terms of to actually change what happens and working back from changing what happens would be on the master plan, having a subcommittee of the master plan to discuss that. But I'm now getting into the planning board's direction, so I'll call on Councilor Moreau.
I'd just like to reiterate that every plan that we have, like the bike bed plan, all of those actually become part of the master plan, right? Those are all referred to and made part of a true master plan. So that's why they don't they all have to work together, right? So I don't think this committee is going to look at one plan and not have to, look at the other aspects. So I feel like it's not an issue as far as they're going to say something that isn't, possible to go forward because, this other thing over here says something different. I think that they look at all of it and it all becomes part of one plan, so.
Right, so I guess my question then becomes, so the committee does the work, it comes up with a position on what it wants, and maybe that is what they want is they're supporting sidewalks in Elwyn Park. And the committee comes back and says, for the increase of sidewalks and, or increase of safety of pedestrians, we want sidewalks in Elwyn Park. The problem only with that, and I know that we're having meetings on this, is that we tend to have a bar that's high enough that we get enough of the community that's affected by those sidewalks to agree with that. And so it seems as though it would not be, not that any committee has any authority that it doesn't have, the popular will just get 9 votes or 5 votes on the council for, but there seems to be other aspects that the committee would have to then get on board, and I'm wondering what's the best way, or what's the best form for the committee? Is it as a standalone committee that's operating outside of the planning board and PTS as an advocate to the city council? Or is it through one of those organizations or one of those existing boards that would prioritize the other things that exist within that, it's going to be competing against in terms of, as our friend Power often says, we prioritize cars, and how do we have a conversation that deprioritizes them in a way that is going to be effective enough to, or is having the conversation at the right place to make it so that that conversation gets back to the council to vote on something. So Councilor Cook first, and then Councilor Baga.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to use 2 other committees as examples. The Arts and Cultural Commission's job is to implement the cultural plan for the city. Now, they can't take action themselves. What they do generally is they come and make recommendations to the council. And so they will make a recommendation to us or ask us to take action. I think that that's a great model. The Sustainability Committee likewise is tasked with implementing the Climate Action Plan, and they've been doing the same thing. They don't actually take specific actions as much as they come to the council and provide us with recommendations or requests for the CIP budget that helps implement the Climate Action Plan. I don't know what Councilor Hopkins, I don't want to presume what she thinks the committee would do, but I would think that a bicycle and pedestrian committee would sit down and make recommendations to the council about the best actions to implement the bike ped plan. And I would hope, like we do have other committees, that there'd be some cross-pollination. So we were fortunate on the Energy Advisory Committee to have a representative from the Sustainability Committee for some time, and that was actually really helpful. And I would think that you would want representation from PTS and maybe somebody on staff who also is aware of what's happening with the planning board to be kind of the liaison for this committee, so that you wouldn't be duplicating work. You would know what the other committees are doing, and then you could make recommendations to the council specifically for implementation of the bike ped plan.
Sounds good. Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Your Honor. And, yeah, just some comments, because this is something I struggled with when I was on PTS, and PTS is challenging for city personnel because we have the fire chief, the deputy police chief, director of public works, traffic engineer Eric Eby, Ben Fletcher, Tyler. I mean,
my designee from the
your
planning
designee from planning. So I mean, out of all the committees in the city, I don't think anything comes close to the amount of city hours go to maintaining that committee. And we did address some things like the Fleet Street redesign, what's happening now on the street over by the Sheraton where it's turning into a T and it's much more pedestrian friendly. So I would see this committee being most effective. Number one, that the counselor who's on PTS would also be in charge of this committee, because I think otherwise things would get messed. And then two, I'd like to see this committee not be as staff heavy, just because I think it's a big burden on the city. So maybe this committee could feed to PTS or feed to planning board ideas and concepts, but I don't know how the execution would work. I just wouldn't want to duplicate that amount of staff time for this committee.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine any staff at the outset in terms of, this is a plan that was already put together. I mean, we've created a bike ped master plan with staff involvement, and this is about effectively, prioritizing the investments that we're going to make. And, I think those most likely will come to council, and then we will direct to the place that we see fit in terms of those recommendations, if we accept them and can accept them, or if we accept them or push them over to PTS or planning or something along those lines. I wanted to have this conversation because I'll get to Councilor Moreau, but I want to have this conversation because creating what the action out of the committee is going to be, knowing that there's limitations on what, there's other, whether it's planning board or boards and commissions that exist within the city that are going to need to weigh in on the changes that they will suggest from the outset has to be a part of this. And so when we create the Blue Living committee, that will be as a part of, that to be an advocate, and look forward to, looks like we'll have this at the next meeting. But Councilor Moreau.
I just was going to say, I think that we could also ask the chairman of the planning board if he could make a request to the existing members of the planning board if one of them might want to serve on this committee to be the liaison. Not me.
Not you?
I have enough.
Chairman
but,
Shulman to pick somebody else but you.
Well,
Okay.
there's
All
a
right.
couple of our volunteer members that are, I believe, avid bicyclists that would actually probably be interested in joining this Order League. So I think it would be worth asking the chairman to put that out at our next planning board meeting and see if anybody would be interested in being the liaison from the planning board on this committee.
Okay, we're making it somewhere. All right, so we'll have somebody from PTS, we'll have somebody from the planning board. I think it would be useful in terms of, we have sustainability will be covered by Councilor Hopkins. She's on both. But to make sure that those are aligned there, in terms of, I think that we could include it in terms of, much more pedestrian access tends to, the most economic, the biggest economic development that we ever made in the city was turning Market Square from a parking lot into, the most valuable real estate in the state. And so, the EDC, a member of the EDC, might, a representation there might be something to consider as well, but take those under advisement. But so far feeling warmer and fuzzier about the idea of having another committee, which I'm always a little bit apprehensive of. Councilor Tabor.
Yes, I think there's real value in having bike riders on a committee that advocates for bike riders. Particularly if we can get, I don't know the size that we're anticipating, but let's say it's 6 to 7 or 8. Bike riding's different in every neighborhood, and bike riders see different needs that are very real to them. So I hope we can look for neighborhood diversity. or at least the 5 wards. And that way we'll get a steady flow of, here's an easy fix, here's an opportunity, here's a place that we can make bike riding easier.
I also think, forgetting like the bike ped, the pedestrian aspect,
I'm a
of this,
walker.
as a part of this, making sure that that is, as much as biking is a important part of this, making sure that we also have the pedestrian aspect. And for bikers, we have an incredible advocacy organization that is, that knows biking. I would also like, as we figure that out, some of the folks that might not be as expert on, might not be as a committed disciple of the bike, that they are not biking, in inclement weather, like when we're thinking about this, because if we get that, we're going to get the highest we're going to get the highest bang for our buck, because we're going to focus on the needs of the 80%, of folks that are a little more judicious with when they get on the bike, and so we're going to focus on those things that will get the most adoption as fast as we can.
Mayor, Councilor Hopkins.
Oh, sorry, Councilor Hopkins.
Yes, so I just want to thank the council for all of your thoughtful comments, and generally, I agree. I think this should be low staff investment, meeting quarterly. And, I really wanted to point out, there's a lot of talk about safety and infrastructure and other things, that this committee could do that aren't just, safety and rules and regulations. We're talking about design and connectivity, and at the Sustainability Committee, we had a great presentation about the master plan and how they're looking to really create little mini downtowns here and there that have walkability and that have, bikeability, and they connect into the greenway. So it's really, I think a prime time too to dovetail with the master plan as we look at these bigger pictures. But again, it's a big picture. So there's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of different interests, and there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. And I think that, biking and walking are integral, and they are what Portsmouth wants to lift up as part of the community. So I think this is the perfect time to create a standalone committee to really focus on this, to be the single-minded issue type people, to really put this forth into all the places where it might fit in and enhance the work of others. It also will be a better engagement portal. Middle Street bike, I wasn't living here at the time, but I heard it was really contentious. It was not a great thing. I like the Middle Street bike lane, but I heard it was pretty gnarly. So whenever we get engagement from the public, again, when we're focused on engaging, when there's a dedicated group, I just think that things might go more smoothly. And, there's a lot of non-infrastructure recommendations that are outlined in the bike ped plan. We can promote safe routes to schools, wayfinding, walking and biking maps, a bike valet program, bike parking, walking groups. It really could become much bigger than just making sure that the bike lanes are repainted whenever Public Works goes out and does whatever they need to do. So I just wanted to point that out too, that this really could be an enrichment to the community, as well as advocating for the necessary safety and infrastructure moving forward with the master plan. And, it really is a time where we're hearing a lot from the public about, we want to be greener. We've adopted that climate action plan that we're working towards. We want to be less reliant on cars, and with the regional connectivity of the Greenway, I really think that we can stand up to be a leader in the region, not just in our own community, through this committee. And again, as the many people who have spoken up, I think it's time. And if for no other reason, why a standalone committee? Well, the bike plan says that. It didn't say add a member to PTS or somewhere else. It said it should be a standing committee in order to enact all of this stuff. And also, it's something we haven't tried before. And what I've really learned, speaking to the public on this issue is that, or this matter is that it's really felt that there hasn't been much progress or attention paid to this. And I know that it has behind the scenes and there's been a lot of work and stuff like that, but to the public's eye, not much movement has been made. And so I think with the support that we've received through the emails and through the community and all of the dovetails of all the plans and, you know, little old me sitting here on parking, traffic and safety and sustainability, and hopefully on this bike ped committee that we're going to stand up, I think it's just the right time to do it and to, you know, test it out and see what happens and see what we can learn and hopefully make some really meaningful improvements. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Bagley.
Thanks, Your Honor. Just during the discussion, it occurred to me one component of this, because you know, when I saw the emails and they came from Sabre, which tends to be, you know, pretty proficient bike riders. But one of the things that we were able to do with citizen support is a lot of accessibility improvements to our city. So we now have the accessible parking at Prescott Park during the summertime that didn't used to exist. We now have accessible viewing stations at the parades and the fireworks. We've even done small things like at the Prescott Park Formal Gardens, the accessible entrances in the back. So now we have signage in all the places pointing it out, which are really low cost, relatively easy to do, but you need somebody to, you know, say, hey, maybe we should do this. So I think if one of the members of this had a strong, and I know Councillor Hopkins does, so maybe she's the member, background in accessibility and you know, seniors walking downtown when it's icy. I know we now use a much different brick than we used to for our sidewalks that has a lot more traction. You know, these little things that can happen kind of behind the scenes a little bit with the, probably more so on the pedestrian side than the bike side. But I think that could be another strength of this committee.
Thank you, Councillor Bagley. And I'll just say to that, if everyone's concerned that these are like avid bikers that bike in all weather, bike or die, I am not that person. I just want to be able to toss my kid in a bike trailer and feel confident biking to Prescott Park or across town. Prescott Park is on my side of town, so that one's easy. But biking across town to maybe his buddy's house in Elwyn Park from Atlantic Heights, that's not a bike route that I would willingly take my toddler in a trailer on. So I'm that biker. I would like to use it to commute more, but I'm just not that confident. And I have my family. If I have my family in tow, I really want it to be a very visible and widely accepted sharing of the road.
That'll be the last word. Roll call vote, please. June?
Yes, Mayor McCackman. Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Councillor Cook?
Yes.
Councillor Tabor?
Yes.
Councillor Blaylock?
Yes.
Councillor Bagley?
Yes.
Councillor Moreau?
Yes.
Councillor Flynn?
Yes.
Councillor Hopkins?
Yes.
Mayor McCackman?
Yes.
Unanimous, Your Honor.
Thank you, June. Next up, approval of grants donations. Acceptance of donation to the Senior Activity Center Luncheon Fund 13 in memory of Senior Activity Center member Sandy McCann on behalf of daughter Carrie Kenny in the amount of $500.
Your Honor, I move to approve and accept the donation as presented.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Councillor Cook?
Yes.
Councillor Tabor?
Yes.
Councillor Blaylock?
Yes.
Councillor Bagley?
Yes.
Councillor Moreau?
Yes.
Councillor Flynn?
Yes.
Councillor Hopkins?
Yes.
Mayor McCackman?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Acceptance of donation to the Portsmouth Police Department from Portsmouth residents Paul Gormley and Kimi Iguchi in the amount of $1,000.
Your Honor, I move to approve and accept the donation as presented.
Second?
Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Councillor Cook?
Yes.
Councillor Tabor?
Yes.
Councillor Blaylock?
Yes.
Councillor Bagley?
Yes.
Councillor Moreau?
Yes.
Councillor Flynn?
Yes.
Councillor Hopkins?
Yes.
Mayor McCackman?
Yes.
Unanimous.
And finally, approval of Granite United Way Opioid Abatement Responsive Grant Number 2 Award in the amount of $13,000.
Your Honor, I move to accept up to $13,000 from the Opioid Abatement Community Grants Program and authorize the city manager to enter in the grant agreement as presented.
Second?
Any discussion?
Your Honor, if I can just give a shout out to the folks involved, the school social worker Lisa Jacobus, police social worker Brooke Murphy Corcoran, under the direction of Chief Newport and Carl Weber. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Yes.
Counselor Cook.
Yes.
Counselor Tabor.
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock.
Yes.
Counselor Bagley.
Yes.
Counselor Moreau.
Yes.
Counselor Flynn.
Yes.
Counselor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor McCackron.
Yes.
Unanimous.
No more roll calls, June. Two quick info items, Your Honor, if I may.
Yep.
First one, we've tackled previously. The second one is a report back on childcare access and quality improvements. This material in the packet is something that that Councilor Hopkins and I sat and worked on, and we present for your consideration. And on March 16th, we plan to stand up and kick off the steering committee. So about 2/3 of the way down on the attachment, the steering committee is proposed to be consist of Councilor Hopkins, staff along with me, to include the economic development, fire, health, inspection, planning and sustainability, recreation and welfare departments, a member of the school department, a representative of the Chamber Collaborative Greater Portsmouth, one larger employer, and licensed providers, and the folks at Seacoast Community School, Portsmouth Y of the Seacoast, Little Harbor School, and the Chamber themselves have already opted in, and we will certainly gain members as we go, and we will keep you all apprised. But by no means are these names, nor the names that are proposed in the advisory network, exclusive or all-encompassing. We would welcome, and I would speak for Councilor Hopkins when I say we would welcome additional voices and perspectives. And in many cases, these names of folks and organizations have been folks who have self-identified to date.
Excellent.
Thank you. And the last update is the written update in your packet relative to two-way traffic recommendation on State Street, now that the proposal was to be considered as part of the utility reconstruction project that you see going on now through June. And as stated in the memo, for various reasons, the staff continues to not support two-way traffic during this trial period.
Any discussion? Councilor Bagley.
Not so much a comment on that, but I've been pleasantly surprised at how much work is getting done on Congress Street, and while disruptive, it's not nearly as disruptive as I expected it to be, although I suppose that'll change as the weather gets warmer.
I think they're doing some really impactful stuff when it's really cold.
Any other items under miscellaneous?
Your Honor, I have two quick ones.
I got one.
Outdoor dining. The portal opens, the emails will go out to all the outdoor dining participants last year. This week, next week, the portal will open, and outdoor dining will start May 1st, so I wanted to give a shout out to that. And also, on behalf of June, we're ready to talk about Student Government Day. It's going to take place, sorry, Councilor Blaylock, you want to take it?
I was just going to remind the council that they'll have a student shadowing them at next council meeting. And the Student Government Day is March 19th this year, so it'll be that same week. So they'll have it nice and fresh in their heads. And then me and City Manager will be meeting with them this week to try to give them some advice.
Along with June, yep, thank you.
Yeah, along with June.
Any other under miscellaneous?
No.
I'd wait a motion
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Portsmouth.